So thank you for joining us. Again, if you'll give us just a couple more moments to allow board members to enter the virtual space, we'd appreciate your patience.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Andrew. Glad to have you with us today. I didn't expect you early. I know you had a meeting you were coming from.
Yeah, I made it work.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I want to be conscious of our time. It's 4:05. I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're going to get started because we have a lot of information we'd like to cover today. And I'm sure as other board members come into this space, we'll make sure to get them engaged. Thank you for joining us today. Please make sure those of you who are on the panel, if you would, you all know the drill this far. Keep your cameras on so that we can interact with you, as well as keeping yourself muted unless you're speaking. That will help reduce background noise. Next slide, please. Today, we're going to have a project update and just a little switch in the order. We're going to then be hearing from our independent highway assessment team, and they will be leading us through a workshop and helping us to envision what a new Albina corridor could be. We'll have some discussion around the charter review and subcommittees and an update on our branding project. And so we look forward to a very robust discussion for the ICA team today. Next slide, please. Again, I want to just revisit with you how we plan to have our discussion. Some of this is emotional and passionate, so we want you to know your voice matters. We want to hear from you. We need you to be authentic, as we believe you will, and speak your truth. I appreciate you all listening for understanding. And again, this is a passionate discussion when we talk about our commitment to the community. So we want to make sure that we are dealing with the issues, not with people. And in light of that, oftentimes we'll experience discomfort, but we know we rarely grow in comfort. So we're going to experience a bit of discomfort, but with that, we ask you to remain respectfully engaged. And because all of the things that we are dealing with did not happen overnight, we cannot solve everything today. So we want you to expect and accept that we may not get to every issue, but we're listening, we value you, and we expect to come to some great outcomes together in this process. Next slide, please. Dr. Holt, if you would share with us briefly.
Absolutely. It's our delight to be in this space, and I just want to remind everyone that while we are in a public space having this meeting. This is not a public meeting. So this is a meeting, it's open to the public. You're invited to come in and listen and participate. And we're glad that you're with us. This is February, as Erica mentioned already, and we are rapidly running through it, but it's a month that's been set aside to celebrate what we identify as Black history. Now, those of us who live in the world understand that this is all of our history, but we highlight the Black contribution at this particular month. There are two quotes that I wanted to reference, not the ones you see in front of you, but there are two statements, one from some soldier of many years ago and another more recent. It says, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars and to change the world." That's from Harriet Tubman. The other is, "Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek." And that's attributed to President Barack Obama. As we sit in this space and are involved in this work, we may not even recognize it, but you're making history. You are a part of the change that is happening. It's happening in our moment, it's happening in our environment, and what will transpire as a result of this work will outlive all of us for generations. So thanks for not only being the recipients of the history that has made us, but for making history in the part. Erica, back to you.
Awesome. What a great reminder. Thank you for that. I want to acknowledge the Historic Albina Advisory Boards who are board members who are in the virtual space with us. If you would just unmute yourself and acknowledge yourself so that we know you're here. Sprenavasa Brown.
I am present.
Great to see you. Yes.
You too.
Andrew Campbell.
Here.
Great. Andrew Clark.
Here.
Miss Estelle Lavespere.
Here.
Pastor Richard Probasco.
Here.
Miss Serena Stoudemire Wesley.
Present.
Mr. John Washington.
Yep.
So great to have you. And am I missing anyone? I'm scrolling fast to see if other board members have entered this space. Yes, we acknowledged Pastor Richard. Is Dr. Carlos Richard in the room? Dr. Richard, are you on mute? Well, we know you'll have plenty to contribute as the meeting moves forward. Natalie, next slide, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Miss Erica. Yeah, I'm just getting my computer situated here. Thank you so much.
Indeed. Thank you for being with us. Yes. All right. I'm going to shift to our director, Ms. Megan Channel, to give us the public comment. Oh, I'm sorry, the project update.
Thank you, Erica, and good evening, board members. It's great to see you again. Natalie, you can go to the next slide. So again, I'm Megan Channel. I'm the project director for this project, and again, very excited to be here. I wanted just to acknowledge a product that we've put together that we hope continues to track and be responsive to the really good comments and questions that are coming up in this meeting space. And I know while I was not personally at the meeting last time due to a personal conflict, the team did hear you, and in watching the recording of the meeting also heard you. And there were kind of three key things that I know that came up around that, specifically just around process for recommendations from this Historic Albina Advisory Board on the highway cover decisions as it relates to the Executive Steering Committee and the Oregon Transportation Commission, questions around air quality, both in terms of the analysis that was done, as well as some of the elements that relate to the highway covers. So I just wanted to point you to, if you haven't seen it already, at the end of the meeting summary, there is a response matrix with comments and responses to those specific elements. So I'm happy to answer any questions. But I think at a high level, with the independent highway cover assessment process, Our main goal for the outcome here is that it aligns with the community values and the community vision. And the HAAB's voice is not only the first voice that's going to be part of that process and advising the project team, but is a critical and important voice in recommending what those outcomes will be to the steering committee as well as the Oregon Transportation Commission. So I just want to emphasize, again, the importance of the work that we have in front of us and the importance of your voice in that effort. And then as it relates to air quality, we can definitely follow up, perhaps Erica, and more one-on-ones with detailed on kind of the background of the environmental analysis that was done. But I guess just first and foremost, I just want to note that air quality is a significant issue for us as well. And we want to make sure that the work that we're doing is helping to improve public health. And so as part of the environmental analysis that was done, we did do a technical evaluation of air quality and did find that building the project actually results in fewer pollutant emissions than not building the project. We were then further went through an environmental peer review process to bring in national experts to help us ensure that those findings were correct, that our methodology was correct. So happy to make that technical analysis as well as the peer review available to you for more information there. And then on the highway cover features, I think, this is exactly why you're here, helping us to define what those development scenarios will be on top of the highway cover early in the design process, so that we can collaboratively work with our design team, with our general contractor on what air quality features may be needed depending on what those future uses are. So just wanted to make sure that I was hitting those key elements at a high level. And then also wanted to make a commitment to you as a board that we want to make sure that there's cross communication across the different communities, committees as part of the project. So that includes the executive steering committee, for which Dr. Holt facilitates with support from Erica, as well as the community opportunity advisory committee that's facilitated by Jonelle Bell. And they're focused on the disadvantaged business enterprise and workforce program. So moving forward, we want to make sure that you're getting updates from what was happening both at the ESC as well as the COAC. So tonight is a first start to that. So if Jonelle Bell is here in the room, I'll be turning it over to him to give an update on kind of the latest and greatest of the COAC events. And before I turn it over to him, I also just want to apologize that I do have to step out of this meeting. I have a standing personal conflict through the end of March for our meetings, but I promise to be back with you when that is complete. But you are in good hands with the project team, with Erica, and just want to acknowledge the bench of technical experts that we have should you have questions tonight. I know you met Monica Blanchard at the last HAAB meeting, but want to acknowledge that Mike Baker is here as well. He is our project manager for our owner's representative team. So Mike, if you wouldn't mind doing a quick hello and wave on screen so that folks know who you are.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here and happy to be of service to the HAAB in any way that I can.
Awesome. All right, Erica, I'll turn it over to Jonelle.
Great. And thanks, Mike, for being here with us. Jonelle?
Great. Well, good afternoon, committee members. As Megan indicated, Jonelle Bell. I am the facilitator for the Community Oversight Advisory Committee. The COAC has been meeting for a little over a year now and is really in the midst of rolling up their sleeves, working with our CMGC, that's our contractor, to start to unpack the contractor's first deliverable. The first deliverable is really around their diversity plan. As a project, there are specific goals as it relates to workforce diversity, as well as DBE, the minority and women-owned firms. And so COAC at its next meeting, which is next Thursday, 4 to 7 p.m., will receive an update on the independent cover assessments, community engagement efforts, as well as start to really deliberate on some of the initial components coming out of the diversity plan of the CMGC. So would welcome all of your participation in viewing those meetings as well as looking forward to having connectivity between this body and COAB. So happy to take any questions, and looking forward to providing this update ongoing.
Thank you, Jonelle. We appreciate you being with us and the collaborative approach for all of the committees across this project that are all committed to advancing our community here in Albina. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right, this is the time where we open up our meeting for public comment as it relates to our agenda. We appreciate you being in the space and trust that you will respect our time, and we respect you. We want to hear your voice. Miss Natalie is going to assist me in this area. We believe that there are several in the waiting room. I believe we'll only be able to take 5 comments today, but again, we encourage you to email in your questions or comments that you would like to be heard and addressed. Natalie, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Erica.
Indeed.
I am going to go ahead and get our timer up on the screen. All public comments are going to be limited to 1 minute, and that is just due to time. It's consistent across all of our committees for the project. And we are going to also remind you that if you're joining through the joining us through the live stream on YouTube, to please mute your video in the background, just to minimize any disruption. So I'm having a little problem with my timer, but I'm gonna go ahead and try one more thing. Well, I am not able to have the timer come up and share my screen at the same time for some reason, some technical problem. So I will be the timer, if that's okay with you, Erica.
Absolutely, Miss Natalie.
Okay.
I don't think we'll have any issues. We can go ahead and begin.
Okay, great. There is a commenter named Holistic Peace Institute. I will admit you into the room and invite you to make your comment. Holistic Peace Institute.
Natalie, maybe they're
Great.
having technical difficulties.
I think maybe they are. Can you see a timer on the screen?
We can.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I cannot see it on my screen.
That's all right. We can help you, Miss Natalie.
Okay.
We are all in this together. Why don't we move to the next public comment?
All right. Okay, the next public commenter's phone number ends in 8577. I'm going to go ahead and admit you and ask you to make your comment.
Welcome.
Phone number ending in 8577. We invite you to make your public comment.
Good afternoon. Can you folks hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Fantastic. My name is Aaron Brown. I'm with No More Freeways. I listened to your last 2 meetings and I really enjoyed the discussion about housing, gentrification, and more opportunities for Black wealth generation. These are very laudable goals that my group, No More Freeways, wants to support. However, asking ODOT to promote affordable housing is like visiting your optometrist to fill a cavity on your back molar. This agency simply does not possess the expertise or skill set. ODOT is eager to promise you things they have no control of, because ODOT is eager to get your rubber stamp for what they really want, adding additional freeway lanes into the backyard of Harriet Tubman Middle School. I also heard in your last meeting a significant concern about air pollution. This is something ODOT does have control over. Director Channel gave you that slide about air pollution 5 minutes ago because ODOT is afraid about tomorrow's Willamette Week.
10 seconds.
That newspaper includes a story about ODOT lying to you about the amount of poisonous air pollution the freeway will bring to Albina. I hope you'll read the story and ask ODOT why you have to accept additional lanes of freeway to get restorative justice. And if ODOT refuses, your committee should push for a full EIS.
Thank you for that. We are going to go ahead and move to the next public commenter. Just give a moment for them to get admitted into the Zoom space. Commenter ending with the phone number ending in 6044, please make your comment. And the commenter with the phone number ending in 6044, please make your comment now.
Good afternoon. My name is Paxton Rothwell, and I'm an organizer.
Hi, Paxton.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. All right. Good afternoon. My name is Paxton Rothwell, and I'm an organizer with Sunrise PDX, and I'm 27 years old. ODOT is presenting this freeway expansion to you as a way to stitch together a community that was torn apart when I-5 was built in the 1960s. They're claiming that the only way to reduce congestion in the Rose Quarter is through a costly and polluting freeway expansion. This simply is not true. Congestion can be cut by getting people out of their cars and off of I-5. This can be done through investments in public transit, bicycle infrastructure, and walkable neighborhoods in Portland. Expanding a freeway doubles down on our reliance on fossil fuels. I'm terrified because we're seeing the effects of climate change already. Summer's wildfires and a recent devastating snowstorm in Texas should be a wake-up call to everyone.
Thank you.
Natalie, actually, that was not time. He didn't have his full minute.
Oh, I apologize for that.
The timer was off, so I believe he had another 30 seconds.
Apologize for that, Paxton.
Paxton, if you're still
Hi, can you hear
there,
me?
yes, that would be awesome. If you wanted to finish your comment.
Awesome. Well, thank you for giving me that time back. I saw the timer. I'm like, this is not over yet.
Indeed.
So. Awesome. I will continue now with 30 seconds. Where was I? What I was saying, expanding a freeway doubles down on our reliance on fossil fuels. I am terrified because we are seeing the effects of climate change already. The summer's wildfires and the recent devastating snowstorm in Texas should be a wake-up call to everyone that we desperately need to do everything we can to address this existential threat to humanity. The current best available science states that we have less than 10 years to prevent irreversible damage from the climate crisis. We need to stop making the wrong decisions about transportation-related emissions today. Can I count on you to demand that ODOT conduct a complete environmental impact statement for this project? Thank you for your time.
Thank you for that. And I will go ahead and go to the next. I believe this is the third. I'll admit this phone number ending in 9214 and invite you to make your comment. Phone number ending in 9214, please make your comment.
Good afternoon. My name is Ada Crandall. I'm 14 years old and a former Harriet Tubman Middle School student. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm here today because I'm extremely worried about the air pollution implications the expansion of I-5 will have on Harriet Tubman Middle School and the surrounding community. Tubman is located just 30 feet from I-5, and the air quality there is already some of the worst in the state. My classmates and I could literally see smog in the air during recess, and on bad days, kids with asthma were afraid to even go outside. And that's just right now. Adding more lanes to this freeway will only make the situation worse. And while I am white, the majority of my former classmates at Tubman are not. The fact that Tubman has the worst pollution in the state is more than just an environmental problem. It's an issue of racial injustice. All Tubman students and all of the Albina neighborhood deserve clean air, and ODOT is lying about the pollution this freeway will pump into our lungs. Please demand an EIS. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I I'm now admitting our fourth commenter, the phone number ending in 0213. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, and then you'll have to accept that request to unmute yourself and provide your public comment. And you should be able to do that now. Phone number ending in 0213. And I believe it's *6 to unmute yourself if you're having trouble with that.
Hello?
There you go. Oh, yes, now we can hear you.
Awesome, thank you. Cool. My name is Josh Spector, and I'm an organizer with Sunrise PDX. Like Ada and her classmates, I attended Portland Public Schools. Unlike Ada and her classmates, I grew up on the west side of the river. I attended schools that had high percentages of white students. I was never faced with the harsh reality that simply getting a primary and secondary education could spell disaster for my health. How can our community continue forward on projects with a focus on restorative justice when the proposed action is an expansion of a toxic, polluting freeway through the heart of our most vulnerable communities? The agency can't give us a straight answer. And when we ask them how many lanes we were building, and that has a direct impact on the amount of pollution in the air that we breathe. I'm involved with Sunrise because we understand that the impacts of climate change and environmental injustice are disproportionately felt by certain communities. It's astonishing to me that Ada is organizing her middle school classmates to demand cleaner air. When I was her age, I was just sort of assuming that the government wouldn't actively be trying to increase air pollution near my schools that might give me asthma, heart disease, or lung cancer. Clearly, the current future residents of the Albina neighborhood cannot make the same assumption.
Thank you. And then this will be our fifth and final commenter. It is the phone number ending in 3877. I see your hand is up. I will ask you to unmute, and reminder, press *6 to do that. And we'll do a mic check and then start the timer. Okay, looks like you are unmuted. Phone number ending
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. My name is Joan Pettit. I live in the Elliott neighborhood, and I'm the adoptive and foster mother of 3 Black Portland teenagers, one of whom attended Harriet Tubman Middle School. I've followed this project with grave interest for 3 years. I do not trust ODOT to address the air pollution at Tubman Middle School since they are clearly interested only in freeway widening. I moved to this neighborhood so my kids could grow up in a healthy environment with other Black Portlanders. And I support all of your work as prominent Black community members and leaders fighting for restorative justice for Albina. But ODOT needs to be held accountable for the air pollution concerns, and the only way to do that is through a full environmental impact statement. I encourage you to use your platform to ask for a comprehensive environmental impact statement that includes studying alternatives to freeway expansion to address congestion and to reduce air pollution. I want the city to be safe and healthy for my kids and kids who look like my kids, and an EIS is the only way we can ensure Albina will get the clean air our children and neighbors deserve. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And with that, I believe that concludes our public comment portion of our agenda.
Natalie, thank you for your help.
Absolutely.
We understand in the virtual space, sometimes we have some technical difficulties. So thank you all for being patient and allowing the public to lean in. We appreciate all of your comments and hope to be able to provide some additional resources and information and answers for you as we engage in this really important work. With that being said, we're just a bit behind, but again, I think it's important that we allowed that time for public comment. I am going to be looking to our independent cover assessment team. So Natalie, you can move to the next slide. Next, please. Next. Next. And next. We had a little redirection because we wanted to make sure that you all got through this very, very important process. And so I'm going to ask Ms. Gina Woolley to begin and help to include you in this segment of our meeting today.
Thank you so much, Erica. Good afternoon, HAAB members. Our team, my name is Gina Woolley, and I'm the lead community engagement and facilitator for the ICA team. We appreciate you taking the time today to allow us to present an abbreviated version of our community workshops to you. Can we move to the next slide, please? So our agenda today will be to provide an overview of what our work is about and how we are approaching it from Nolan. We will have a neighborhood context. We'll provide some neighborhood context to understand where the work is going to be happening and a review of the framework that makes many neighborhoods successful from Kate Brooks on our team. And then finally, we will be having a review of the precedents and governance structures that allow from Stephen Lewis and Olivia Moss that have been implemented in other Black and disenfranchised communities around the country to revitalize Black and urban core neighborhoods affected by past disinvestment and public policy. Today, at various points in our presentation, we're going to be asking you to provide feedback and comments about what you think is most important to consider when thinking about highway cover development scenarios. So please take notes and hold your comments until we get to those discussion segments if possible. And finally, at the end of our presentation, we'd like to ask you to provide us with some feedback about our show or about the content that we're presenting today from our show and how you think we might be able to better engage with the community in our targeted community workshops that begin on Thursday. So please be prepared to give us that feedback at the very end of our show today. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Nolan and we'll get started.
Thank you, Gina, and good afternoon, everybody. So I want to frame what we're doing in work session 1. As a reminder, our process assumes that there are 3 large work sessions, and each work session consists of 1 meeting of the Executive Steering Committee, 1 meeting of the Historic Albina Advisory Board, and 2 community workshops that together constitutes a work session. And so this is the first of 3, and it's really focused on listening, focus on informing, making sure that we understand the diversity of opinion and the priorities within the community vision. And so our goal is to understand what are the types of uses, spaces, and community character that are most important to Black historic Albina community members. And the goal is to inform and create a new sense of community place and belonging as we create scenarios for the highway covers with an emphasis on restorative justice. So that's the purpose of work session 1 in total, and this meeting is part of that. Next. You will recall that at your last meeting, I shared some examples with you of highway cover projects around the country. Obviously, those are meeting the goals and needs of those communities, and ours will be doing different jobs to meet the goals and needs of our communities, which you're going to help us to understand. But we did want to just revisit these briefly to note that in addition to the job that they're doing on these highway covers, they are also doing a job of joining 2 parts of their city over and across a highway. And that is the thing that they have in common with us most, and that we will be talking about today in the first section here. Next. So I'm going to jump over the 3 questions to be answered. As Erica noted, we are a little bit behind schedule, and you've seen this content twice. I will, though, on the next slide, just remind you that where we're ending up is that in addition to what we call the base case, which is the assumptions and the design studied as part of the NEPA environmental assessment, we will be creating 3 scenarios. Scenario 1 will be limited to the area of potential impact identified in the environmental assessment. Scenario 2 may extend beyond that. And then scenario 3 may be something else after we've developed those first 2 scenarios where it's determined that there may be something else we want to study, another idea we want to test out. So in the end, our consultant team will be creating 3 new scenarios. And the purpose of this work session, again, is to provide us with the kind of input on and priorities so that we can start developing those. Next. This is our scheduled graphic and shows in relationship how work session 1 fits in with the other 2 work sessions, and then the final recommendation to the Oregon Transportation Commission. So just again, goals for this work session this week are solidify understanding of community vision, present opportunities to achieve those goals, gather your feedback to inform the development of scenarios, and then as Ms. Gina just said, gather feedback on how to measure performance of the development scenarios. And of course, from your committee, we're also interested in feedback about how we're doing in this process and whether we can improve that as we go through this process. So I am going to hand it over next to my colleague, Kate Brooks, to talk about the neighborhood story. And Gina mentioned this, but as a reminder, there are 2 parts of our presentation. The one is a little bit more focused on the physical context and geography. The second one is focused a little bit more on the kind of programmatic programs, services, businesses, things like that. And so we'll focus the conversation on the first, and then we'll address the second one.
Great. Can everyone hear me? Just check. Great. My name is Kate Brooks. As Nolan mentioned, I am an urban designer with CGF. And it's nice to meet you all virtually. It's hard to not do this in person. But what I'm going to do is start with a brief review of the neighborhood history. And then we'll look at some of the existing physical conditions around the API, which Nolan just described as the area of potential impact. These are things like the street network, the transit network, existing community assets, open spaces, key community service providers. And then I'll talk through some possible locations for a revitalized neighborhood that can better connect those existing services, community assets and services. And these areas of focus are really meant to describe centers of social activity and economic growth that can benefit members of the historically impacted Black community. So as we talk through what we're calling these focus areas, I'd like you to think about the things in your neighborhood that are important to you and what you'd like to see created in a new development in the vicinity of the Albina Rose Quarter area. Next slide. So this is part of the historic Albina neighborhood in 1938. This area is just adjacent to the river and south of Broadway. This was mostly residential, and you can really see the scale of the houses and streets and get a feel for that neighborhood character that once was. Next. This is the same year, 1938, but we're further north now, just looking south toward the residential neighborhood we just looked at. In the foreground is the intersection of North Russell and North Flint. The future site of Harriet Tubman Middle School is shown there, as well as Lillis Albina Park, which is dashed in blue. And we're showing the future alignment of I-5 through this area, which as we now know is sitting directly adjacent to the school. I also want to note that the squiggly edge of the black line, which was drawn with a pen over this photo, is actually the edge of a grade change, which still exists today. Next slide. I'd like to just pause for a moment. We'll see if this animation works. Yeah, and this just shows the evolution of the urban fabric around the Broadway-Weidler interchange. It starts in 1948 and goes through 2018. So just pause here and let this play, and you can kind of watch as things change. One more time. We can keep going now. So as we start to talk through where a new center of development or neighborhood focus could be, we want to extend the discussion out into the adjacent neighborhoods around the API to consider a broader zone of influence. So you can see these radiating zones around and over the API as a range of focus for this discussion. Again, I'm going to walk you through some general urban design strategies that will help inform how the programming elements that you've expressed a need and desire for, like affordable housing or community gathering spaces, opportunities for business wealth creation, that those can fit into a broader physical planning framework. So this part of the presentation is really setting the table with the tools needed for your community vision to be physically realized. Next. So these are the adjacent neighborhoods around the interchange with the Albina Vision boundaries shown in orange. Lower Albina is just north of that, and the surrounding neighborhoods here are Boise, Elliott, Irvington, and the Lloyd District. And in all of these neighborhood context diagrams, you're going to see the API as a black dashed line. Next. These are the major existing streets and transit lines, and we've labeled some major landmarks for orientation in blue. So you can see in the foreground, the Coliseum and Moda Center, the Rose Quarter Transit Center to the south of that. Then moving north is Portland Public Schools. Across the interstate is Harriet Tubman Middle School, and further north of that is Legacy Emmanuel Medical Center. The major east-west connectors in this area are Broadway and Weidler, intersected with Vancouver Williams at the interchange, shown almost in the middle here of the drawing. MLK Junior Boulevard is also a major north-south collector further to the east. The MAX lines are shown in orange, which we're showing as a single color, though there are multiple MAX lines that run through this area, especially at the Rose Quarter Transit Center. The streetcar is shown in yellow with multiple stops along Broadway and Weidler. And the green dashed line represents the future alignment of the Green Loop, which is utilizing the future Clackamas pedestrian bridge. Next. So this diagram is highlighting several existing assets and services around I-5 and in the surrounding neighborhoods, but you can see that there's really a concentration of assets in the north and northeast neighborhood. To name a few, along Williams and Vancouver, there is the Vancouver Avenue First Baptist Church. Dawson Park is located adjacent to Legacy Emmanuel. The Williams and Russell redevelopment block is also on the corner of Legacy Emmanuel, and Harriet Tubman to the south of that. The Matt Dishman Community Center is to the east, and there are a number of other schools and parks in the area as well. There are additional services that are not labeled yet, like the Urban League, the Billy Webb Elks Lodge. There's Dean's Beauty Salon and Barbershop, and New Song Church, and several other longstanding Black churches. I also want to note this is our first pass at starting to label these assets with our knowledge of the area, but certainly want to hear about any others that are important to you so we can understand what's important to connect to. Next. So the next few slides are what I previously referred to as our focus areas. And this is our first geographic focus area, which is in the vicinity of the Rose Quarter. But more importantly, this is the location of the historic Albina neighborhood. There is an opportunity here to redefine this area to serve the community's goals. Because there's a lack of urban energy at the Rose Quarter most of the time, there is an opportunity to connect with and activate the large open space there and utilize it for community gathering or other programs that serve the community. This location is also served by several transit lines, as we just saw, close to the Rose Quarter Transit Center. And it has great bike and pedestrian connections to downtown and further east. There's also potential here to restore part of that historic grid by reconnecting streets across the highway and redeveloping some other sites in the area. So the major connections here are shown with a focus on east-west connectivity, but that's not to say there couldn't also be increased north-south connectivity. Next. So this area is focusing a little further north of the Rose Quarter and showing strong connections to the neighborhood to the north, where the majority of the Black community was displaced to and live now. The darker red circles in the north are the locations of the local community assets we just reviewed. And this focus area could be an opportunity for a new neighborhood center. And I'm talking about the dark red circle that's sort of sitting on top of the highway, just north of the Rose Quarter. So this could start to embrace some of those existing historic buildings that remain, like the Left Bank Building and Paramount Apartments. And the north-south connections of Flint, Vancouver, and Williams can be reinforced here. Similar to the previous focus area, this could also support new east-west connections and restore portions of the historic grid across I-5 as well. Next. So this area is further into the north and northeast neighborhood. So given the northern location, there could be potential east to west connections across I-5 toward the historic district of Lower Albina. That's the darker red area shown below I-5 to the west. This is the only neighborhood that has largely remained physically unchanged. So there could be an interesting way to reconnect to that historic neighborhood fabric. We do want to recognize, however, that while it's physically remained intact, it's socially and culturally much different today, which is something to consider. Next. So as Gina said, I'd like to go over some of the basic physical characteristics that provide a strong framework for any successful neighborhood. And in the next part of our presentation, my colleague Stephen will describe the types of supporting programs of these physical settings that we've heard and are desired and needed by the community. Next. So a vibrant and successful neighborhood is walkable and well-connected, meaning you can get everywhere you want to go within a short distance, and that usually means within a 5 to 10 minute walk. And a truly walkable community encourages destinational walking, not just recreational walking. So that means a wide range of services must be accessible on foot, which includes transit. So if you remember back to the first historic slide that showed the historic neighborhood, that was built with a traditional 200 by 200 foot block. And that compact scale really creates easily navigable and pedestrian friendly neighborhoods. I want to point out that the photo on the left is the Clyde Warren Park in Dallas. Nolan briefly touched on this as a cover example. But this has reconnected the city grid across the freeway, and it is a fairly nice small scale block size. Next. So just as important as the proximity of uses and services is the design of the streets and sidewalk. Even if there are places you want to go or visit within a short walk of your home, you'll likely not travel by foot if the walking routes are unsafe or unpleasant. So designing safe sidewalks and street crossings is crucial for a pedestrian environment. But it should also be pleasant. So well taken care of businesses and houses, maintain landscape, nice materials like brick support that. And in order to truly encourage walking, it needs to be efficient. So a gridded street network is usually the best solution with small to medium block sizes that allows for quicker options. I also want to note the photo on the left is of some local community members who you may recognize. Next. So access to transit is a key factor in creating connected communities. Providing a variety of transportation options is critical to ensuring that low and moderate income residents can access places outside of their community for work or other needs. Also, prioritizing facilities like cycle tracks or large sidewalks promote active transportation, which is activities like riding a bike, skateboarding, or walking. And we know that physical activity improves our mental and physical health. So it's important to make these facilities and transit options be safely accessible and prioritized within the pedestrian network. Next. So fostering an environment for social interaction is one of the most important elements of a community. I like to reference the term healthy placemaking because it encompasses many of these topics we're discussing, from walkable neighborhoods and active transportation to parks and playgrounds and community gardens. And these spaces support overall community health. So giving the residents and broader community the opportunity to live, learn, and engage in these spaces can promote a sense of shared ownership and help support a sense of community identity. And it's important to note that these should be safe spaces for the Black community, and Stephen will touch on that in a little bit in his review. Next. So I'm not going to speak too much to this because, again, Stephen's going to cover a lot of this in his content. But as it relates to the public realm, mixed-use building program can provide active use at the ground floor, like retail or dining or entertainment, which can also help create safe, pleasant walking environments. Stephen and Christiana will talk about ways that development in these areas can support equity. Next. Green and natural environments also provide physical and mental health benefits and other environmental factors, such as improving air and water quality and reducing the urban heat island effect. As humans, we are biologically drawn to natural environments, and it's important to have access to those types of spaces for our health. Next. So again, I'm not going to review this in too much detail, but as designers, we're always going to integrate resilient and sustainable design into all of those neighborhood elements we just reviewed. So a good example of resilient neighborhood program is a local community garden. So providing space to grow healthy food can have numerous effects beyond improved nutrition. It may create jobs, it might revitalize downtowns or commercial areas, and provide opportunities for social interaction. Next. So we thought we'd like to pause here for a moment and allow any questions, hear from you about any new neighborhood opportunities that you're interested in seeing created in this area. If there's anything we've missed that you want us to pay attention to, or things that resonate with you. So I'm going to hand it over to Gina.
Thank you, Kate. Erica, I'm probably going to need your help.
Indeed.
To recognize people who may want to make comments or provide us with feedback. So if you can tell me if we've got hands up of people that want to talk, that would be helpful.
And indeed, Gina, could you just quickly paraphrase what in this section we are asking for feedback in regards to?
Yes, we are asking people to tell us what they would, what's important for them to see created here, and what kind of connectivity with the, what's going to be important in terms of connecting and reinforcing and leveraging the community assets that still are here, and what new community assets are important that people want to see. We're really talking more about positioning of neighborhood.
Right.
Maybe Kate, do you have that? Do you have the exact language that you asked the question that you want to rephrase it for us?
Sure. I just asked, we'd like to hear about the new neighborhood opportunities you're interested in seeing created in this area. So kind of the broad area that we talked about. And is there anything we've missed that you want us to pay attention to? And were there things that resonate with you?
Thank you.
Perfect.
Appreciate that.
I see 3 hands. If we'll start with Estelle, and then to Andrew Campbell, and then Mr. John Washington.
All right, thank you. Estelle?
She's getting herself unmuted.
Oh, okay, very good. I can't see, I'm sorry.
There you go, we can hear you now.
Excuse me. Yeah, I just had a question, which I hope is in line with everything. I just was curious, excuse me, if this was answered. How would we make sure that the historic diaspora could access the services and assets that you're talking about? That was just my concern as everything was being addressed, is just making sure that when you're thinking of the assets and services, always be thinking about making sure that the the diaspora could access them? Like, how would we be getting people back to the neighborhood to access the services? That's just my concern.
Appreciate that concern. I think we will talk a little bit more, Estelle, about, policy structuring for, in relationship to development scenarios in the next presentation. So if you will hold on to that thought, and if you still have questions after our next segment, we will happily respond to them.
Great. Mr. Campbell?
Good evening, everyone. I agree what Estelle just said. A comment I was going to say, but then also I was going to add on to just a reminder to always kind of have some cultural art piece in there so like the Black Portlanders can feel more connected to that area, especially since they're not really there currently. And who knows within the future how that will look like. And then also just to echo that we can need to hopefully that the designs reinforce safety, like public safety for people, just especially for Black Portlanders to really feel more comfortable in a gentrification area. So those are just the two comments that I wanted to say.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And hopefully you'll feel better too after our next segment, where we've got a lot of images of how, placemaking has been done in Black communities around the country, examples of how that's been done. So thank you. But thank you very much for your comments, Andrew.
Mr. Washington?
Hi, I'm John Washington. Good evening, everybody. I'm the executive director for the Seoul District Business Association. So what I just witnessed in this urban design is basically y'all just redesigned or designed my district without me knowing about it. It kind of, it made me, urban studies is my background. And so Gina Woolley just made a statement that they're going to set up something, they're going to show it something a different way moving forward. So part of me wants to suspend so that I could hear that. But what I just witnessed just now is Urban Design and Urban Studies 202. But really it makes me very uncomfortable when I start seeing stuff like this, because what I see is urban us right on out of here, and a lot of the designs, I mean, it's really easy to come up to an understanding of a design that it works for me as a culture. But when I look at this, it's outside of me. It seems to be indifferent to me, those images and the way they do. But it's not like I can't understand how to advance my style of living and living into a higher bracket, all of that. But I'm saying what feels good to me as a Black man in a community, and what does that community look like, number one. But the second thing that keeps weighing on my mind is in our district, we've had over 9 main streets. And in our main streets, we found over the last 7 to 10 years, those main streets have been systematically taken out from under our auspices. And we remember when Alberta first started, and then came Mississippi, and now Williams and Vancouver. But when I look at the graphs all feed into those main streets that we're taking out of our quiver. Okay, so MLK is not really on that. Is that, and I guess I had another question and concern too about why was the grain elevator taken out of the expansion equation? Those properties that are along that frontage of the river are pretty exclusive properties, so I can't quite understand why they were taken. They're not included in that boundary line that I see. That's the grain elevator. So, but I'm gonna suspend for 1 second as to listen to the second part of this. But y'all had me fired up for a second there, Gina. I was about to come at this president, but I'm gonna listen to what y'all got to say a little bit so that we can.
I think you're gonna feel better when we get done, John.
I certainly hope so, because I'm holding this food y'all sent over me. It's right in the center of my stomach. I'm not, and I'm about to throw something up on y'all. So anyway.
Mr. Washington, yes, we thank you, and we trust that you're always going to be authentic and speak your mind. Keep in mind that these are scenarios for us to help to develop And so thank you for
But Erica, one thing we have to be really careful. These scenarios
yes,
are
sir.
the indicators in the beginning of the story.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we got to make sure that we're real clear about how we begin this story.
Indeed.
Because how we begin it is going to be how we end it.
That is absolutely correct, John. And what I want to say to you is nothing is designed. These are just pictures of not of concepts of what we're talking about building, but simply trying to understand principles of thinking about what, helping people think about what makes a successful neighborhood. So I don't want you to think that we're proposing to build things that look like what you just saw. Okay.
I see Nolan with his hand, and then we're
Yeah.
going to go to Ms. Srinivasa.
I want to make a really, really, really important clarification. These are not scenarios at all. In fact, they're diagrams of our observation of what is there today and how it relates to one part relates to another. And the purpose of this meeting is for you to tell us what you'd like to see once it becomes a scenario. So we're not drawing scenarios today or showing scenarios today, or even asking for your feedback about scenarios today. We're asking what is it that would make you at the next work session, when you see scenarios, say, wow, they really listened. So today is that meeting. So when you say we redesign your district without you knowing about it, our goal is so that when we see you next time, you say, oh, you got some ideas to redesign my district with me knowing about it. So just to clarify, we did need to ask some questions with those diagrams of you, but it really is setting a stage so that you can tell us which of those observations make sense, which don't, and what are the other things we consider before we start drawing true scenarios.
Nolan, thank you so much for that clarification. I see two hands. I'm going to go to Srinivasa and then to Ms. Serena Stoudemire.
Okay, so my first question was having to do with the animation that we saw at the beginning that had like the historic images. What I want to know is if you all have and can provide us access to any of the historic air quality and environmental quality reports that align with those time periods and those images, so that we can see as the neighborhood has changed, how have those environmental impacts changed as well. I think that's an important piece. My other question is, you mentioned community assets, but maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear a definition of how we're defining those. I heard some mention, it seemed like those were supposed to be specific to the Black community, but I'm not clear on what is versus what is not a community asset, and how are those assets taken into consideration with a successful neighborhood? Because similar to the gentleman who spoke before me, when y'all were describing the successful neighborhood, I did not get the sense that those things were specific to Black communities. I got the sense that those are very much just generic. And so I would like to see and have reported back to us in our next session, what is specific to Black communities that create a successful neighborhood. And the number one thing I think should be on there is ability to live in healthy and clean environment and clean conditions. And so I think that piece was kind of missing, or maybe it was implied, but I just want to make sure that we are specifically looking at how does this tie back to Black communities for a successful neighborhood? How are we defining community assets? And once we know what those are, what is going to be the metrics of getting more of those assets that exist in other places throughout the city back into this historic Albina neighborhood?
Thank you for those comments. Charles, are you on the line?
Gina, I think we can just accept the suggestion, and that we will come back at the future meeting with a little more clarification. I think it's best to just keep it simple.
Okay.
Indeed. Ms. Serena?
I never thought I'd agree with
I know where you're going.
But I do. And also with Sprint and everything else that everyone else has said, I guess the environmental study is really important way back then up to now. And then as we start to move forward, because we do know that in Black communities in which we're not anymore, we did have the worst air quality. And so how is that going to help as we're moving forward? Then also, what about the data, not just qualitative, but quantitative data that we're looking for as we're starting to move forward? And as Mr. Washington said, you all put up those scenarios and then we always hear this is not how it's going to be, but it ends up being that way. So I think that's really important that I'm glad that he said that and that we continue to keep that in the forefront as we're having these conversations, because we've always seen examples and those examples become it becomes what it is. And how do we stop that from happening? And being someone whose family lived down there on Benton, where the water district was, again, we've seen this and here we are again. And also just putting up people that we know in the community, that's not satisfying. That does not help me, because I did not see what is a healthy, like Sprinter Boston said, what does a healthy Black community look like in Dallas, in DC, in Atlanta? What does that look like? It would be nice to see what a Black healthy community looks like after it has been gentrified, and when are the people coming back, or if they were ever allowed or been able to come back, or was also able to afford to come back. And I'll just say it that way, because then it drives up the taxes as we build these new communities. And then our folks, we may be able to afford the home, but we can't afford the taxes that are in that. And so we're not able to come back. So I think we just need to be real clear and honest. So we're rebuilding this community, but is it really for us? And I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much for your
comments, Serena. And I'm going to ask everybody to wait till we get through the next segment. And if you still feel exactly the same way, we want to hear about, we do have examples from other parts of the country, of how neighborhoods have been revitalized for Black communities. So,
well, and Gina, again, I understand the wait and see. I work for government, been there, done that. But then again, I just think it's really important that we keep that in the forefront when we're having this conversation, because sometimes it gets lost, it gets forgotten. So if we don't continue to beat that drum, it won't happen.
Absolutely. And I don't mind you beating the drum. I think it's important. That accountability is critical in these processes to really get the outcomes that the community wants to see. So no problem.
Absolutely. I know we need to move into the programming phase, but I would love to hear from Dr. Carlos Richard.
Thank you so much, Ms. Erica. And thanks to my colleagues who have articulated their experience and expression before me. One question for the committee that I want to echo my colleague, Ms. Serena, about the environmental air quality study. If we're going to build this I-5 bridge or new development, and it's going to reduce congestion, I think what I'm envisioning here is that even though it might reduce congestion, it's going to increase traffic, which will increase air pollution. I don't think we're going to build a new I-5 bridge to have less cars. We're going to build a new I-5 bridge, and we more than likely will get more cars as population continues to increase in Oregon and in the city of Portland. Was there any forethought or vision on the impacts of an ostensible increase in pollution once the project is complete? Because again, I don't think we're going to get less cars with a new I-5. I think we're going to get more cars as more people move in, which means more pollution. And I wanted to know if that was taken into account as this project was initiated. Thank you so much.
I think that's probably a good question for the ODOT team.
So Dr. Richards, our team is simply studying the covers and the cover solutions. So we're not studying, none of our work relates to the actual improvements happening on the highway that you heard a lot of the testimony about.
So well, just slight clarification. We will demonstrate if there's a comparison between the scenarios that we are producing and the way that they compare to the assumptions in the environmental assessment, if they have a difference in air quality. But just, I want to make sure that you get an answer to your question about the assumptions or studies that have been done, which were prior to our process.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate that because again, how I directly relate this to this discussion now is just simply about change, right? So if we're going to change literally change the structure of a neighborhood potentially to whatever that may be, I think that needs to be into consideration, because I think there's a misnomer here. We keep referring to Northeast Portland as the Black community. As it stands today, North and Northeast Portland is not the Black community. That's out in East Portland. So I think some of the language that we use it maybe has me kind of behind a little bit, because I keep trying to say Black Northeast Portland, but there is no more Black community. So as we envision these new neighborhoods, I think it's going to be interesting, because when we put up a slide that compares us to what Dallas may look like, that's where I struggled a lot. So I'm hoping to see something that will ease my conscience.
Indeed. Thank you, Doctor. Yes.
Thank you so much.
I want you to know that I am making sure, and the team that is supporting me in these meetings are making sure to gather your questions and thoughts. And so that we're able to address those and make sure that you know that we heard you. I also have Mike Baker, who's with us. And Mike, if you would chime in here, we'd appreciate your input.
Yes, what I would say for tonight is that the environmental assessment that was done did take into account a future year and population changes and projected changes in traffic volumes, vehicle fleet, emissions. It looked at air quality, looked at greenhouse gases, looked at noise. That work was then was peer reviewed by 6 national experts from around the U.S. And results came back to us that the work was done in compliance with federal highway standards. But I think we may want to reserve an update on that work or a summary of that work to this group down the road. And certainly for those who want to read it offline, we can direct people to the entire work of the peer review group, as well as their findings and the basis of the work that they did their peer review on. So I want to feed as much content to people as people have an appetite for.
Right. Thank you. Yes, Gina, thank you for that, Mr. Baker. Gina, I think we can move forward in your presentation.
All right, I think we should move forward. So what we'd like to do at this point is to talk about the types of programming and outcomes that the community desires for the Albina Rose Quarter area that could provide restorative justice for the historic Albina community. If we could go to the next slide, please. So what we've done is we've organized outcomes that we're pursuing and talking about that we've heard to date into 3 basic categories: community wealth, community health, and community cohesion. These are objectives. All 3 of them are important elements of providing restorative justice. And what I'm going to do is have Stephen and Christiana, they're going to take over from here and talk you through some examples of how these objectives have been accomplished through programming in other Black and disenfranchised communities around the country. Stephen, you're up.
Thank you, Gina, and good evening, members. Love the rich conversation, love the passion. And let's see if by sharing some examples of work done in similar communities, we can restore some sense of possibility for you all that you feel excited about. And just to reinforce at the outset what Nolan said, you know, these are typologies that we're showing you of different approaches to the environment, to the built environment, not to say that this is in any way what we are envisioning. This is a place for you to react much in the way that you did so that we can start to have this conversation and understand where we need to go. So with that, I'd ask that we advance the slide, please. These are the three outcomes that emerged from the ESC, the Executive Steering Committee, and are informed by a lot of stakeholder input that's been gathered over the course of the project. So the notion of community wealth, community health, community cohesion are part of an overall system. They work together to make for a strong and vibrant community that is at the heart of restorative justice in our case here. So images we're about to share with you, they show examples of ways that other communities, not unlike Albina, have achieved outcomes similar to those identified by the ESC and community stakeholders. I'll provide a physical description and a little color commentary on these images that we're going to see, and my colleague Christiana will talk when appropriate about the kinds of governance structures and financing mechanisms that have to work together for any of these things to be possible, right? So, Christiana.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Christiana. I'm with HRNA, and we're an economic and real estate consulting firm focused on the governance and the financial analysis of this assessment. So as Stephen mentioned, while he goes through these program examples, I'll sort of jump in and speak to the governance models or the types of entities or organizations that can actually be stewards for any new programming and assets on the cover. So identifying these types of organizations and their functions and the funding needed to support the community outcomes that have been expressed early on is really important for making sure that any new assets actually accomplish the community goals that are being brought forth. The right governance model for the covers and the assets in the surrounding area is really going to be determined by what we hear from you today and in coming meetings throughout this process. So beyond that, sort of identifying the models and illustrating how they can work in our future design scenarios, what we've found is, as we've sort of looked across the country, is that implementation really requires both community and political leadership. And a lot of the examples we'll show you, governance examples, are really partnerships, public-private partnerships. We've found great examples where community and local leaders are working together to create a plan that identifies who will actually have ownership of the assets that's created through this project, and also have ownership of any development that's catalyzed by this project to make sure that any resulting future development and growth actually aligns with the community goals being expressed. So this, should be in place before there are any market responses to changing neighborhood conditions in this district.
Next slide, please. Great. So on the upper two slides, we're looking at an area of Detroit where I worked recently for the mayor as the urban design director for the city. And this is called the Avenue of Fashion. And these are Black-owned businesses that had been barely making it, struggling, but through the federal community development block grant program, the city was able to channel funds into the neighborhood, working with these business owners and neighborhood residents to talk about ways that they might want to see the environment improve to improve safety, beauty, and the ability to serve patrons in a more pedestrian-oriented fashion. So you see a very widened sidewalk on the upper left. Cuzzo's Chicken and Waffles, that was a spot, everybody liked to, hang out there. So extending that activity into the outdoors just has done wonderful things for their business, and all these businesses, quite frankly, are thriving. Down below in the lower right, you see a job training center that's part of a mixed-use project that was in South Central Los Angeles, where the historically Black YMCA was renovated and added to for an affordable housing project that had lots of wraparound community services, including job training, which was mentioned by one of the members earlier, just the kind of holistic picture that needs to be created for the community to reflect our identity and service all of the needs that have historically been, we've been disadvantaged on. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is very much about business creation and satisfying multiple needs in the process. We're known for having food deserts in our neighborhoods. The idea that embedding, as Kate mentioned earlier, local community gardens up to farmers markets, ways to bring healthy foods, particularly fruits and vegetables, into the neighborhood, curated by neighbors often, is one piece of a bigger puzzle of community health and well-being, but it certainly has the potential and has been shown in other places to actually be revenue generating, and ways for residents to take something that starts as an informal activity and actually formalize it and make it predictable and income generating. In the lower right are two businesses in Detroit in a neighborhood that was gentrifying rapidly, but that businesses are anchored there in a way that they're able to take advantage of the new population while still serving the historically traditional neighborhood, and not without challenges. The ladies in the lower right own a nail salon, and they're watching businesses pop up around them that they feel are threatening. And this is where this union between policy becomes so important. There has to be an intentionality and a will among people who make policy, working with residents to ensure that as new investment comes in and neighborhoods are beautified, that those assets we can't view them as we're not deserving of that stuff. We are, and we should be able to live and thrive in those environments. So we'll go to one more next.
So just on this, sorry, if we can go back one slide, just to speak to the sort of the governance structures here. You know, on the top left, we have the Black Community Development Corporation in West Louisville. It's a community-based organization, it's mission-driven, and they're stewards of programs, but also these physical spaces that support workers and entrepreneurs. So they leverage various public spaces and private funding sources to actually provide job training, affordable space for entrepreneurs, and other programs. On the left, we have an example of a cooperative ownership model. So Evergreen Cooperatives set up the Fund for Employee Ownership. This is an example where employees were able to buy the business from a retiring business owner through the Fund for Employee Ownership, building long-term wealth for the employees in this neighborhood.
Yeah, and before we move to the next, I just want to make a comment. The Evergreen was basically set up by a colleague of mine, a sister from Cleveland, who works for the Cleveland Foundation, and she organized a bunch of institutional anchors that happened to be located within the middle of a low-income Black neighborhood. And as their employees would go to the hospital in the morning or go to the university, they drive through these neighborhoods and then they drive out at the end of the day with no benefit coming to the community. So what India Lee found out was that none of them were talking to each other, and she organized them all. And at the end of the day, they looked at the demands that these institutions like universities and hospitals needed, and what businesses could they stand up and make employee owned by people in the neighborhood that were going to satisfy those needs. So one was a series of greenhouses that grow leafy greens, and they provide those greens to the hospital and universities as part of their food service. They have the exclusive right to provide those. This has gone out so successfully, they just built an additional greenhouse. When this was stood up about 10, 12 years ago, it was offered to local residents. Jobs were offered at $15 an hour with full benefits, which was unheard of at the time. And there were a line of folks down the block interested in this and applying and getting these jobs. So it's made a tremendous impact. And so that's another model that you guys might be interested in learning more about. And I'd be happy to give you that offline. Let's go next. I'm really happy and pleased by this because it addresses some real concerns about wealth creation. These three people you see on the top are friends and colleagues of mine in Detroit, each of who has their own real estate development company. And you see beneath each one a major project, one of many that they're involved in bringing to fruition, which is, it's a little easier in Detroit. And I want to make sure that, the comparisons don't overreach, because Detroit is an 80% Black city. And so most of the folks there look like us. And so they are the beneficiaries of these kind of programs that really support and encourage development by local people. And in this case, we have great projects coming online from Madi, from Cliff, and from Sonia. Oh yeah, we can move ahead. So whether or not the residents want to put new housing on a lid or in the surrounding area to give former residents and their descendants an opportunity to actually return and live in the area will be borne out through this process. In the event that there's a need expressed that part of the programming for this project includes affordable housing and or market rate housing, it should be clear that giving people the ability to be in close proximity to where they live, work, and play is important toward the cohesion of the neighborhood, but also as Black folks are able to and local folks are able to participate, as in the previous slide, in the actual development of these projects, there's an avenue, a clear avenue toward wealth creation there. Another part of wealth creation is putting us in a position where we can earn, which means in the lower right, providing quality childcare so that we can drop off our children in the morning, know that they're going to be well cared for, they're going to be in an environment that's stimulating, they're going to be able to teach us things at the end of the day when we come back to pick them up. So there are all these different facets that kind of tie together. And then the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative in the upper right, this diagram, that goes back way, way back. There's a brother named Gus Newport who started this whole thing back in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken, if not earlier. And it was really one of the first moves that empowered Black residents of that part of Boston to take their futures into their own hands, which meant that they bent the arms of the politicians to get policy change. They worked, they stood up nonprofit organizations, neighborhood organizations, and then they created these public-private partnerships to really help enable their hopes and dreams.
Yeah, so in terms of the governing structures here, I mean, there are a wide range of organizations. We're showing here community development corporations, community land trusts, community land banks that can actually help deliver assets and programs that stabilize communities, particularly in the face of rising rents. The community land trust, you know, they shown on the top right in Boston, they directly control the land underneath the housing on behalf of the community. And many types of assets from housing to community centers can be built there. They actually partnered with the city of Boston to take ownership of dozens of vacant lots in this case, in this redevelopment area, and they maintain ownership of the land under about 225 permanently affordable home ownership units that will remain affordable in perpetuity.
Okay, next slide. So we're going to pivot now and talk a little bit about community health, understanding again that each one of these wealth, health, cohesion all come together as a system. And there are a whole range of health issues that we can talk about. And one of them is just the direct attention to our medical needs, which in the Black community, we know statistically are known to be specific, right? Around high blood pressure, diabetes, other obesity, other things that our communities in particular have to do battle with. Also, statistics that come out about the disparity between how Black patients are treated by their white medical providers is scary and astounding. And so here we illustrate on the lower two slides, local community clinics that Kaiser Permanente built in neighborhoods and staffed with people from the community or that reflect the community in terms of values and lived experiences, so that there can be a really healthy environment and people are willing and anxious to go get healthcare, not scared of it, not scared of what's going to happen to them, but they are provided with dignity and respectful attention to what their needs are. So this is one aspect of providing health for the community.
Yeah, and so the same types of organizations that I mentioned before can also play a role in delivering community-based healthcare. So in the example shown here, Project Row Houses, which was providing affordable housing in the previous slide, also delivers a mental and physical healthcare support program for young mothers that actually live on site in housing provided by the organization, who are part of the Young Mothers residential program. The Black Community Development Corporation in West Louisville that we mentioned early on also runs the Hope Wellness Center, which is a space that's specifically focused on providing healthcare in underserved parts of Louisville, and which in West Louisville has the worst health outcomes in the city. And it also provides space for Black healthcare providers to practice.
Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, we know that there's a tendency for our neighborhoods to be, devoid of healthy food, fruits, vegetables, et cetera. It's not unusual to see patches of personal community gardens or personal gardens that we each grow. I got one in my backyard. I mean, I love to go out there and pick stuff and bring it right in the kitchen and cook it. And it's very satisfying. But for people who don't have access to that, to be able to put into the neighborhood the opportunities for growing healthy food and to involve our young people in that exercise is something that can go beyond just the casual community garden. And I show you this slide in the upper right, Mudtown Farms, which is down in Watts in South Los Angeles, stood up by a community organization called the Watts Labor Community Action Committee. I've worked with them for decades now on a lot of their initiatives, including affordable housing, but in this case, Mudtown Farms, which is a large several block area that's been converted to a working farm so that local residents who want to have a little patch can have it there, but other people who are farming more intensely for the market also have opportunities to have plots that they can cultivate in this location. It's just getting off the ground right now, but it has the promise of being a really exceptional asset to that neighborhood in Watts. There's, the Philadelphia Farmers Market. We have to combine entrepreneurship with how we present these, food amenities to neighbors and make it very welcoming and very inviting. Next slide. Another part of health is recreation, active recreation, and particularly giving our young people, and not just our young people, but all places where they can go and be safe and feel like the identity of the place that they're in is reflective of them and their culture, and therefore feel very at home being there and become stewards and watchers of those places and spaces that they value. They like those to be in great shape when they come to use them. We also need to consider, safe environments like the gymnasium you see in the upper photograph, which is part of that YMCA project that I mentioned earlier, where there was the job training in the lower level, and they have this gymnasium upstairs. And down below on the right, this is like one of my favorite pictures. This is these brothers playing ball in the middle of the street in Detroit, where they actually closed off the street to traffic. And in the summer, they reclaim this area, paint the pavement, and they put up these basketball hoops. Now, who they know is going to come when they do that. And that's just without having to put up a sign saying, hey, brothers and sisters, come down here and play ball. It's just a place in the middle of downtown Detroit where people feel invited, welcome, and they look forward to that exchange and interaction. And yeah, they're surrounded by people in suits and ties of all colors and stripes that are going back and forth to work or walking to the food trucks near where they're playing ball. But everybody stops for a minute, they watch, this is like major acculturation and ownership of space and place that our folks can enjoy in the city of Detroit. Next slide. Soul, mind, body, and soul health, right? We talked about the mind being addressed by structured healthcare, and mental health services are another important aspect that we are overlooked by traditional medicine or resources that we can access healthcare from. We need culturally sensitive and specific mental health services, particularly for our youth, but for all our members who've been, existing under trauma. And so then there's the body part, which is about recreation, being able to get out, walk, exercise, do yoga, whatever we do. And the part about the soul and the spirit is about having places that are pastoral, they're green, open space that you can breathe in and you can feel safe in, and you can take in the nature in and soothe your spirit and your soul. So these are like very important ingredients to a holistic community, a holistic neighborhood, to have quality, green, open space.
Yeah, and so oftentimes public-private partnerships are relied on to actually manage these types of projects and ongoing operations associated with open space. Open space is built and then it has to be maintained. And community involvement is so important to ensuring that parks and public and civic spaces actually feel welcoming and create opportunities for recreation. So on the bottom here, we have the Buffalo Bayou project in Houston. So from a governance perspective, it's the Buffalo Bayou Partnership, which is actually a nonprofit that's responsible for implementing all of the improvements for the restoration of the Buffalo Bayou waterfront. It's over $200 million to date in capital projects and operations for our 160-acre restoration project, which provides substantial green space and recreation space. We actually at our firm recently worked with the partnership to create a plan to extend the Greenway network along 4 miles of the Buffalo Bayou waterfront east of downtown Houston. And it reaches predominantly industrial and post-industrial neighborhoods that have been disconnected from the surrounding historic communities. So in that case, it's a nonprofit that's actually managing this massive public space and responsible for making decisions about how the money is spent. On the top right, we have the Sun Valley Eco District in Denver. The Sun Valley neighborhood in Denver is a primarily low income residential neighborhood surrounded by industrial uses in close to downtown Denver. The Sun Valley Eco District is actually a nonprofit that was set up to manage the funding and partnerships and development of the Sun Valley Eco District, which is a plan to implement a new district energy system, new river crossings, and a new street grid in an effort to actually advance restorative justice in this historically Black and low income community.
Slide, please. Oops, go back one. Right, so this looks a little familiar from what Kate was talking about earlier. And part of our community health has to do with how safe our streets are. If you're like a senior or a child trying to pass along or across these streets to get from point A to point B, you know, the sidewalks and the crosswalks that are available right now, they tend to favor the automobile. Residents and visitors to the neighborhood need to have confidence in this infrastructure that it can support safety and clarity of where you're going and efficiency without worrying about, you know, running across the street and getting hit. That's an outcome objective that in the future, when this is actually designed, will have to be taken into, you know, heavy consideration. Now, all the modes that have to be considered, like driving or walking, cycling, or just walking toward mass transit, have to be coordinated so that there is a level of safety that allows people to feel very comfortable and willing to go out and get from point A to point B in that way. Now we're going to move to another slide that Mr. Campbell, I couldn't have paid him to set this one up any better when he talked about how you mark a space and the issue of art. Before I describe what is being illustrated in these two slides, I just want to say that the community cohesion is perhaps the most important tenet of reestablishing community, you know, in a place. And it would be worth taking a minute to review what the environmental assessment document defined as cohesion. I'm going to read through a series of bullet points that are things that maybe you can hold in your minds as we look at these examples and we come back and have further conversation about them. So community cohesiveness is identified by a variety of factors, including but not limited to an identifiable community boundary, so knowing where your place is, a concentration of people with similar economic and demographic characteristics in an area, a common ethnic, cultural, or racial identity of residents, a shared experiences and values, a critical mass of a specific demographic community's population, concentrations of communities serving businesses, community-based activity centers and institutions that address the unique needs of residents in the area, active street life and pedestrian activity, and lastly, shared gathering places for recreation, expression, celebration, and social connection. So here we see two examples in the slides. On the left, this is a major art installation by a very famous Detroit artist, Charles McGee, who was in a wheelchair this day to unveil, and they literally had this giant thing covered in a canvas. This project, in the background behind the sculpture, you see the Charles Wright African American Museum, which is a major structure designed by a Black architect back in the day. And it's still like one of these great places that people like to come to. So they drew off the curtain off of this wonderful sculpture, and McGee just was in his element with hundreds of us out there to celebrate the unveiling and the fact that this is now standing prominently in the public realm, so that people who come to Detroit and come to these museums and pass by will see this statement of culture, and it's undeniable what it's kind of rooted in, right? So on the on the right-hand side, you see the conceptual renderings of what is now about to be under construction in South LA, the Crenshaw, Destination Crenshaw project, which is in the area of Los Angeles that we all consider to be the kind of epicenter of Black culture, commerce for years, which has fallen into kind of disinvestment over decades, like many other neighborhoods, but is now looking at the kind of change that you all have expressed fear about in terms of when you start to bring resources and assets to the neighborhood that have not been there before, then what does that mean about who's going to come in and want to own those and use those and live in those places? And in the case of Crenshaw, there's a new light rail line, part of LA's growing, expanding light rail system, that's going to have a subway stop at Leimert Park, which is one of the end anchors of this multi-block long experience of Black culture that's now being daylit and brought forward. In the upper slide, you see some of the public art opportunities that we're going to take advantage of. And this is just an incredible statement about this is who we are, this is ours, we're here. And this is just something that everybody's gonna have to come visit, because I wanna touch on it a little bit before we wrap up, the importance of perhaps, if you all determine that this can be a destination, that Albina can once again be a destination and somehow be a proxy for the broader Black community and the entire Portland community, because there are things happening here that everyone wants to touch and everybody wants to taste and everybody wants to listen to. So we'll get into more of that in a little bit briefly. So let's see, we can.
Just one quick thing to add there about Destination Crenshaw. So it was actually seeded partially by a public funding commitment from the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Agency, which was made alongside the agency's investment in the light rail that Stephen mentioned, that's running through the neighborhood. Just sort of an important example of the importance of public and private sector commitments that advance sort of both transit and community-focused projects simultaneously.
Great, thank you, Christiana. Next slide, please. Right, so shining a light on the history of Lower Albina community is one way of healing and generating pride about resilience of people. And here we see on the left a really elegant signage program that a colleague, Renee Kemp-Rotan, did for the city of Birmingham, Alabama, when she worked for the mayor there some years ago, to tell the story of civil rights within the history of Birmingham. And these signs appear along the routes that people walk along daily to get from one place to another around the downtown area of Birmingham. And they are really captivating because we may have heard of an incident, but when you stand there and you look at an image of people and you read a text about the event in some detail, it really, you have an emotional response to it. And we're seeing so much of our legacy being daylit on TV specials now, and Skip Gates is doing a great job with his African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross series. We're having to experience our collective pain in ways that, on the one hand, are kind of tragic, but on the other hand, instill in us a sense of opportunity right now. How are we going to meet this moment? And that's why, yes, members, be skeptical based on what has happened in the past, but also be empowered, so that as we go forward and develop your wants and needs and try to give them some shape and form in this area, that you feel very much a sense of control over that. And the things that we want that are outside of our ability to control, either because there are no financial kinds of structures or resources that can support them, it's important to be honest about that. Not everything's going to be possible. So being able to align the kind of finance structures and governance with the kind of wants and needs that are going to come out of this process is the key to setting up priorities and knowing kind of setting up expectations that have some, meat behind them. Next slide, please. So this is kind of beating a dead horse a little bit, but again, having places, both buildings and public open spaces, to hold cultural events at, programs. This is one of the important puzzle pieces in creating a sense of belonging and pride of ownership. So these are just several examples of spaces that have been specifically made for Black communities to hold events, particularly support youth, and to bring people together around events that, everything from a Juneteenth event to other kinds of celebratory events. And then one of the things in the lower right that is similar to what we're doing here is reconnecting, connecting neighborhoods that once were seamless, that got severed by the freeway and imposed on by the convention center and the Moda Center. Now, how do we use this opportunity to reinstill those connections? And then lastly, last slide. This is really about what is special about you all that you would, if you could wave your magic wand, lift up as something that you want to celebrate, that other people other people will want to get to. Is it food? Is it music? Is it spoken word? Is it whatever, and that's for you guys to talk about. But just to be able to create a destination as an affirmation of the validity and value of who we are and what we can bring, but more importantly, to create an economic engine for prosperity through taking advantage of those things that we might do in our kitchen one day, but we can do in a larger scale the next day and have some benefit from it. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Gina.
Thanks, Stephen.
You're welcome.
So just quickly wanted to highlight a couple of examples of local things that are reinforcement of community that are going on here locally, not Black community specifically. In the top picture, this is the Alpano Center in Southeast Portland, which is basically a cultural center, a multicultural center that host events and celebrations, and it's an example, and it has affordable housing on top, so it's an example of the type of facilities that can be created to reinforce the Black community in this neighborhood. And then the two pictures from below are of the Art of Living and the Morpheus Youth Project. These are placemaking grants that Metro has provided to groups, community groups and neighborhoods to reinforce community cohesion, create activities that engage cultural youth, Black youth and BIPOC youth in constructive ways, and provide opportunities and enterprise opportunities for artists. So there's so many different levels of activity that can be thought about in terms of how these elements can get applied to a new place or a revitalized place in the Albina Rose Quarter district. So could we go to the next slide? I just want to pivot here and say that in our workshops, this is the point we will be doing breakout groups with workshop participants. This element that you see on the right-hand side is what is called a mural board, which is really like an electronic whiteboard. And in our small groups, we'll be capturing all that conversation in these small groups. We'll have a mural board operator who's recording the feedback and input from the community participants on those, and it will become kind of a permanent record of what we're capturing. So at this point, however, because we essentially in this group don't have the time to go through that kind of a breakout process. What we want to do is we want to pose, we'll ask you for feedback about what's most important to you. I think that what we need to hear from you at this point is what's important to you to see happen in this district. If it deals with specific types of programming facilities that you would like to see, become part of the programming, those are the kind of things we want to hear. We're not here today to solve all the issues around the how, but when we come back with the scenarios, we will start to talk. Once we know what the what is, we will be talking about how we ensure that the elements that the community feels are important to try to create in these scenarios actually get supported, and what kind of governance, policy structures, and financing needs to also be put in place in conjunction with these scenarios to assure that what happens actually does serve the Black community long term. So with that, could we go to the next slide? So what we want to know is, we want to hear from you today. What's important to you? What kind of programming, what kind of facilities, what kind of places would you like to see reestablished? And this is a visioning process. What we're trying to understand, it's very important for us to hear from you what your vision is, so we can take that vision and go try to solve all the other issues that you've addressed here today in your conversation about how do we make sure that these scenarios are actually going to provide benefit to the Black community, that they're going to allow places for people to come back to enjoy, to feel safe in, to feel like they belong in. Those are all elements that we will be speaking to once we know what the what is that you're interested in. So with that, I'd like to open it up, and we've got time now for you guys to provide us with feedback about what's important to you to see happen in this neighborhood as
Thank you,
part of
Gina.
the covers. Yes.
I'd love to start with Serena, because I know that she has another obligation.
Yeah, please.
I see Estelle's hand there. I just want to make sure. There you are.
I'm still waiting to see some things that's really relevant to Portland, and also what it would look like after COVID, because those pictures was way before COVID and way before all the protests happened. So what does our after COVID and after our protest life really look like in Portland? So I guess I'm just really willing to see that. And then also waiting for those studies and a little bit more research that you guys are going to bring back next week. Because that was, and I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer or anything like that, and I understand what you said. People were coming here for, what we had to offer and eat some different things like that. But we don't have that yet, because our small businesses are hurting right now, especially our small Black businesses and entrepreneurs. And so what is that going to look like for them, after COVID? We're looking at, and this project could take a little bit longer. Maybe it's part of the rebuilding of Portland and all of that, and rebuilding of our communities. But I guess I'm still kind of at the, what does that look like after? Yes, Mr. R.
Hello, darling. May I respond? So, you make me think of how we can kind of bring this conversation even forward more. So how about imagine if you could wave your magic wand, what would it be like? What would be there and what would it be like? And then we can reverse engineer that to see what's, how we get there. So the thing is,
I get, and I understand what you're saying. I guess I'm just, how do we, and I can imagine that our Black businesses are thriving. That's what I would love to see. And that is what my imagination would be, that our Black businesses are thriving, they are making money, that they are able to sustain and continue to do for themselves, and they're sustainable, and they're going to be leaving some wealth for their families, because our wealth is in our property, not really in our dollars that we hold in our hand, but what is it that we have? What is it in property and different things like that? So what does that look like? What does our wealth building look like? What are the legacies that we're hoping to leave for that next generation is what I see. And right now, that next generation for me is hurting. So how do we, and they're bleeding. So how do we stop the bleeding? And as we start to move and think about and reimagine what this could possibly look like. So that's where I am.
Wonderful, Ms. Stoudemire. Thank you for that.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I see a hand from Estelle.
Yeah, just to kind of hop on to what was just said, just about ownership. If I think about what's most important to me as far as programming, and as far as, always keeping in mind our goals, restorative justice, I would think, and this could be pie in the sky, any kind of like buyback opportunities for any kind of property, if something was to become free or something, to arise, kind of, something, I don't know how that would work. It's just pie in the sky. And then as I was looking at the Black, community centers or the basketball courts or the businesses, did any Black people own any of that stuff? Like, was that owned by the community that was using it? Because that's what I think is most important. Not is it being just used by the Black community? Do they own the property? Do they own the building? Are they getting the benefit of the lease? Because yeah, that is how wealth is built. So, and that's really what I think of, the Black community coming back. It's not just like to be there and hang out and then hop on the public transit and then go back to where they've been displaced. It's like bring them back to stay there. And then just I kind of think about, just always centering our conversation on people, because air quality is important and all of those things, but just kind of really think about what we're trying to do as far as restorative justice. Like why have we been uncomfortable being in the neighborhood? And just kind of always be thinking of those things, because that's what I'm thinking, what's important to me as far as programming, like actual ownership. That's all.
Estelle, can I ask you a follow-up question? When you say, why have we been uncomfortable? Can you answer that question?
Oh, I mean, I've been
from your standpoint. Can you speak to what would need to change other than the economics? Are there other aspects that would need to change that would make that you think would set the table for us to come back? That's what I'm asking you.
I think a concern I've had in my head we talk about us coming back is, will we also bring over policing with us? That's a concern about public safety, like on the transit or in communities, if we're using the park. I think about us being over policed in an area that we haven't been in the past. I just think about that sense that I've had of not belonging in a neighborhood that I grew up in, that I was a baby in, where my parents lived. Like I no longer am comfortable there. And so I feel like really paranoid and kind of like, oh my gosh, am I gonna get the cops called on me? And so just like really addressing why there is discomfort, and that, addressing actual like gentrification. Like I just feel like a step has been kind of skipped a little bit. Like I know this is of course about the freeway expansion, but I mean, I just kind of feel like a step has been skipped.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I see a hand from John Washington, but I also want to make sure that we're addressing, Srinivasa had a comment in the chat in regards to community land trusts in Oregon that are specifically focused on equity and intended beneficiaries that are racially specific. So I wanted to make sure that that was on the record. And then how do we guarantee that the institutional anchors for historic albina are actually descendants of those who are from historic albina and who were displaced? So I wanted to make sure to enter that into the record.
Thank you.
And Srinivasa, if you wanted to comment on that further, I'm going to ask Mr. Washington to give his comment, and then we can come back. Mr. Washington, you're muted.
I said that I would surrender that space if she was ready to go now.
I just want to hear the response. I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
So
well,
I think,
you know, go ahead. Somebody gonna say something?
Well, just she asked what the responses might be to her question, and I think the answer will come in the scenarios. And so depending on what those scenarios are and what they include, I think we'll try to explain what are the relevant precedents and what are the models that we're following, or if we need to create a new model, we may do that. But I think it's probably easier if we answer your question in the form of our scenarios.
Thank you. You know, I'm sure it ain't the food. The food was real good. That knot's still in my stomach. And I'll tell you why. You know, because I don't really want to struggle for the space. I mean, there's some things that we know. Some of us have been at this work for over 25 years, got blood in the dirt, you know, and some of the things that were proposed, I get it real clear, but some of those things are going on right now. You know, all the art projects that have been going on around. You got the big old murals, and you got all kinds of historical heritage markers, and all these types of things are actively going on. A lot of the new scenarios in which came into play on a lot of those things. I appreciated a lot of those examples. I really was encouraged by the fact of, you know, that structure incorporating more of the community efforts of these types of services, rather than the neighborhood associations, the business associations, and incorporating them into our movement and advancement forward. But we've seen a lot of different kinds of things that are going on. And I appreciate Ms. Stuttermeyer's comment about the small businesses and how they're dying. We realize that we're not going to recover. There's not this spectacular outcome on the other side when the COVID is gone. I mean, we got an attrition that's going on that's beyond y'all's wildest imagination. You'll see that it's going to be even worse than you think it is. But and I'm not going to be the town crier right now, but what I am going to suggest is, and tell you what it looks like. For example, when we talk about affordable housing, in this scenario where we're at right now, if you look at affordable housing, you'll find that for us, most of the affordable housing is winding up on the MLK corridor. And that's another form of redlining, if you really want to know the truth about it. I mean, because when you go over to Williams and those places over there, and you ask the developers, well, what do you think about affordable housing? They respond by saying, oh no, we already thought it was going to be on MLK. But yet at the same time, we are not consistently developing business strategies that go along with that development. I had a client that came in today, and the first thing he's trying to open a business on MLK, and his comment was, we got a lot of affordable housing, but how are they going to afford, how are they affording to come in and spend money in our businesses? You know, so there's a disparity that's going on there with that. So I think we have to be a little bit more broader in our spectrum in terms of how we begin to navigate some of these things. The other part is that how do we begin to feed our communities and have them have adequate food sources and those types of things in our community? I agreed with that. I think that there's a whole lot of things that are going on in Portland that deals with that stuff. But for me, it's about solidifying some of those pillars that actually make that contribution to the community and knowing what some of those pillars actually are. You know, and then the other part was that I wrote down was that when we start looking at Portland and the Northeast for what it is, when we're talking about wealth that is transferred and that kind of stuff, one of the biggest disparities that are biggest perpetrators of racial discrimination and injustice has been in the fact that we have not educated our community adequately enough about the issue of business and those types of things. You know, the educational part that goes along with that. We see a lot of Black people in business constantly, but they don't have an EIN number, or they don't file taxes or whatever it is, but been doing business for 5 and 6 years. So there are a lot of different kinds of things that we're dealing with that are within the scope of the largeness in which has been presented to us tonight. But there's some nuances that are difficult that we need to be looking at that are connecting those dots. So that's my response to what I was experiencing. So thank you.
So John, can I ask you a couple of follow-up questions?
Be more than glad to answer them for you, Gina.
Yeah, you know, based on the things that you think are missing, can you identify a couple of things that you think are critical to actually happen, whether it's services or types of facilities that would address some of the things that you think are missing that you just spoke to. Can you, that we need to anchor in Northeast to help those businesses that, you know, surviving, those business people that don't have EI. Are there specific services or types of facilities or programs you think we are lacking?
Yeah.
And if
we've been trying to.
Could you speak to those?
Sure. That project that you see, RV Smith, that's on the corner, Alberta, was my project. I was the chair of that project and bringing that subdivision into existence. But one of the things that we found that while bringing that here is that we had difficulty finding journeymen who can literally speak to and address the issue of Black development. You know, one of the things that was real difficult was identifying people who can literally put a crown on the top of a building that would indicate that because for most of y'all who know a little bit about community development and urban studies, a lot of times these structures are beacons. They attract certain kind of people. So when people go in and they build certain subdivisions and those types of things, you'll be amazed that the crowns on those things are like a whistle call. They're a beacon. So we had a difficulty finding Black developers who can put a beacon on the top of a building that could call Black people into a community or design structures that are appealing to Black people in that community. So we've been trying to sell to Prosper Portland a construct that really is a construct that has a feeder base. Not only do we not have journeymen, but we are not having growing constructs that support the next generation of that thing. So there's no feeder base in there where we actively go out recruiting young people to come into as entry-level people and go out and become journeymen. And then we have that construct that supports journeymen, number one. Number two is when we do mixed use. The biggest problem that we're having with mixed use is that we are getting a whole lot of people who understand the building of mixed use, but they can build affordable housing, but they cannot address the retail part of that to equal the same type of balance with that. So we need to mitigate the price points on retail space as well as we're mitigating a residential space. So there's a big disparity in that. You know, because you can't come in if you ain't got the money. I mean, if you want to go to the next level of business and you can't afford the space to be able to do that, then that's also another issue. The other problem is education. You know, we don't have enough organizations that are structured in our community right now that educate people on the knowledge about the importance of having a sense of individuality and that sense of freedom to be able to go out and start. It's not for entrepreneurism isn't for everyone. But I'm tired of supporting constructs that always reinforce the service level industry of our community. Is that everything is always forced into some kind of service. We are sub something, always a sub something, but why can't we be or be it? You know, so those types of things are issues that we're constantly addressing and trying to deal with on a daily basis. The other one is to understand how to utilize and access our real estate in this and learn how to preserve that and the importance of its integrity and what part it plays in our overall generational wealth, educating our community on that. So these are just a few of those specific little pockets and areas where I'm finding that we need a little bit of support and assistance in.
All right, I think I heard you on those 4 points. You know, a lot related.
And also mental health. I'm always a proponent for mental health.
Yeah.
I want to give us a reminder that we have about 5 more minutes in this discussion, and I wanted to get to Kevin Modica, who's had his hand raised.
Please, yes.
I'll try and be brief. Greetings, everyone. Sorry for my tardiness, but I do have occupation to attend to most of the time during the day. So public safety and community safety, you know, I really always focus in on this because I've been in many places where there's been redevelopment, revitalization, and the creation of space, and then the service end of keeping that space well and healthy and usable doesn't seem to have been considered. We have a huge houselessness problem here in our city. So, you know, without sounding exclusionary. If we create such open space, what do we do to address those that are going to take up that space in their quest for survival? Additionally, I'd like to see, I mean, if it's the magic wand moment, I would like to see a open and accessible, non-denominational, faith-based place, where any denomination that is historically present in our community can use that space, whether it's to have service or to provide service or education. I think that, the BEC was great, but we must have something of the same. I know that there's plans for a Center for Black Excellence, but, I refer back to Jeff Canada's Beacon Schools and the Harlem Children's Zone and other Renaissance areas across the country that really focus on us, right? Without having that poverty platform, is that we're always going to be poor. We need this. We must have that, but no way to expand upon what could be better. Magic wand moment. Why can't there be a university there? Like U of O has some property that is downtown in the Old Town area around Front and Davis. Why couldn't there be a business school? Why couldn't there be a technical based school for career pathing, whether it's U of O, Portland State, or part of the community college consortium? I don't want to be offensive, right? But yes, we love music. Yes, we love performance. Yes, we love to eat. Yes, we love sports. But what else is there? What else is there that we can access for, and again, 100 years from now, what is the legacy of this going to be? And I know I was having a little chat back and forth, and I might be using the wrong term, but first right of refusal. Are there going to be plots that are reserved and maybe tiered so that individuals who historically were moved can have first right of refusal on the property or for the use of a storefront with the same tax abatements that places like Domalier receives or other businesses, and not to poke those businesses in the eye. I mean, they got a great deal, but at some point, this area's got to be more than a sports complex ghost town and partially redeveloped. We want the whole thing developed. Public safety, community safety. You look at Dunthorpe, they have their own patrol. They don't call the police very often. You have Maywood Park. What is that, 12 blocks of homes? They're their own city. So whatever's done here, there's got to be that type of foundation, I think, or else it's just going to be catch as catch can. And we'll be dealing with the same issues that we deal with now with open space that's supposed to be for community and for entertainment, without any real roots, without any real structure and focus for future.
Thank you so much. Gina, I know any observance of time, but I think that this is important, and I know we cannot redo this conversation, so I'm going to take a little liberty here. I'd love to give Carl or Pastor Richard Probasco an opportunity. Estelle, I do see your hand, so I want you to know that I acknowledge that you're there. But if Mr. Charlton or Pastor Probasco has any input as to the programming and things that they would like to see, I would love to hear from them.
Thank you for that, Erica. Appreciate it.
No, I'm liking what I'm seeing, and I've got a sore throat.
Oh.
I'm not going to be able to add too much this evening, but maybe next time I can add a bit more. But I do like what I've heard. It all sounds good. I wish I could say it was new. Not new. It's, it's the same stuff that we've heard many times before, but hopefully we're going to engage in this effort and be a bit more successful than we've been in the past, and maybe think about new strategies and so forth in terms of implementing these things. The vision is always relatively easy. It's how you put it into play, which is where we're going to have some issues and so forth. So I'm hoping that we can really get down to that, because that's where the rubber's going to meet the road.
Amen to that.
Yes, sir. We hope that you're feeling better. Pastor Probasco?
Yes, I know our time is just about spent. So I think what I'll do, I will write my comments down. I will send them to you. Gina, I'll send some to you, send them to Erica. And because I'm processing a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that was said. And I think one of the things that does actually, at least I'm looking at, is the amount of space that we have to work with is limited. And sometimes we talk about all these grandiose plans. We want to have this, we want to have that mall, we want to have these things going on. And as I'm looking at it, I keep reviewing how much space do we have? What can we do? All of this I'm assimilating based upon all the things that we want to do. And I totally agree with the idea that we need to educate our people that once we get to this particular place where we're going to distribute some of the things that we want to inherit as far as space and opportunity and doing something that's going to last. I've got a lot of thoughts. I need to put them down on paper, and then I can talk about them at a later time, because there's a lot of stuff going on. We don't have time to talk about it right now.
I appreciate and respect that. I also want to acknowledge Srinivasa, great comment in the chat in regards to the assumption about low income and making sure that there's an opportunity to attract and recruit Black middle class and wealthy entrepreneurs and how they can invest in this area as well. I want you to know that we are capturing the chat as well, and we'll include those comments so the ICA team has those suggestions as well as that those thoughts can be reflected in the meeting notes and a part of the assessments going forward. Just briefly, and we only have a bit more time, but I just wanted to make sure that all of the HAAB members who wanted to chime in here, if it was Andrew Clark, we hadn't heard from you yet. If you had anything you wanted to contribute to this conversation, as I know the ICA team is moving into their community workshops this weekend.
I think that the general concerns are there. I mean, we all want a healthy environment. We all want to have the opportunity to participate in what gets built in this area. But I think that as we look at this, it's a really good opportunity to just imagine all kinds of possibilities if you're able to start capping the freeway and start developing communities from scratch. That's why this forum is here, is for us to be able to articulate that and discuss that with the designers and with ODOT, so we can figure out how those outcomes are going to be portrayed. And one thing I really do want to stress is that a lot of this stuff is an opportunity to build wealth. And if you can build wealth, you can also be able to distribute it in different ways and be able to have more of a say-so in your future. So I want to be able to look at the way that these contracting practices are going to be happening for the freeway, looking at how the design is going to roll out, and then looking at what the opportunities are for ownership and for real estate development opportunities as we start realizing what this space is going to look like and as the opportunities become real for people. And then that's where we need to be able to step up and be involved. So I think that's it for me. I mean, I want to be able to see what they come back with and give the architects an opportunity to bring back more further thought out options for us to look at, and then I'll start weighing in a little bit more then.
Perfect. I want to just echo some things happening in the chat. I want to let you know that there's a link in the chat for Black Focused Youth Program for Real Estate Development from Mr. Stephen Lewis. So please take advantage of that. I'll try to copy it and email it as well. Also, Leslie, I see that you entered in the chat. I apologize. I didn't see that you were here. I wondered if you wanted to unmute and comment quickly.
I just I put in the chat what my concern is.
Yes, ma'am.
My concern is that we can wish all day and every day, and unless somebody's got a magic wand or wins the Powerball and's got $100 million laying around, I don't know where the money's going to come from for all of these wonderful things. I work for the Housing Bureau. I know what we have available for housing, but I just don't know where the funds, even to do a public-private partnership, where's the money going to come from? And I would love to see, a lot of these things, because I'm walking distance to the freeway, but I'm concerned that we're setting this bar so high and that we're going to be disappointed because where's the money? So I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, because I want to see the project be successful, but I also want us to be realistic that the only thing ODOT can pay for are the covers and the freeway being widened, and the rest of this has to come from someplace else. Mm-hmm. So that's my comment for today.
Great perspective too, Leslie. Thank you so much. I also want to encourage HAAB members. These other questions, if they resonate with you, if there are other suggestions in regards to programming ideas, what you feel would, again, even in light of Leslie's comment, the wish list, the ICA team is asking specifically what you envision for this community, what restorative justice looks like to you in regards to the covers in this community. You could write those things down, as Pastor Richard Probasco mentioned. You could email those, and if you send them to me, I will make sure that I forward them on to Gina and the ICA team. Gina, did you or Nolan have any closing comments in regards to the workshop?
Yeah, no, we want to thank everybody for your time today, and I want to say that if you do have comments, we would welcome them. Pass them to Erica; she can get them to us. It would be very helpful to have those comments in the next week, because we are moving into the next phase. Our next phase of work will be to essentially start developing scenarios. And the next time we come back to you, we will have a couple of scenarios to review with you and to show you what the input has produced. So that's the next stage of work. We will be doing the community workshops this weekend, or Thursday and Saturday. And again, we just want to thank everybody for this rich and thoughtful and robust discussion. And hopefully when we come back, people will feel like we've heard what was being said, and will begin to see that, how some of this can come together, and what the strategies are for making that happen. So that I think that is all we have for you guys.
Great. Thank you, Gina. Thank you to the ICA team, Stephen and Nolan, and others who participated. I know it's a lot of work, it's taxing, and I know that you all have a busy week. So again, we appreciate you helping us to envision what could be. And though we understand some of these things, as Carl mentioned, we've seen before, but we are hoping that there is a commitment to more of a collaborative effort, and that we can find the resources we need to envision a re-established Albina. I'm looking at our time and at our agenda, and I know the time is spent. I want to honor that Jessica is with us. I know there were 2 additional items on our agenda. One was to review the charter and to potentially approve it. But again, I feel as if we should move, if Jessica could briefly give her update. I will, as we're shifting there, admonish you all to take just another quick look in your time over the next week in regards to the charter. In many of our one-on-ones, I didn't hear many changes, but specifically, if you all will take a look in regards to the addition of the independent cover assessments new subcommittee opportunity. And I have spoke with many of you about that. And so I'll connect with you one-on-one online so that we can begin to move that committee forward with the ICA team. So Ms. Jessica, are you with us?
Erica, can I jump in really quickly?
Absolutely, Ms. April, thank you.
Okay, thanks. So I promise I will just be a quick second. I just wanted to introduce Jessica in a bit, but just wanted to talk first about the reason for the rebranding process. So this is part of a larger initiative that the agency is taking, as well as the Urban Mobility Office, to look at how we're showing up in communities. It's just another way we want to do business differently. We want to make sure that the brand represents our commitment to the values that were collectively adopted by ODOT and project stakeholders. So I know that Jessica has had some conversations with some of you, and I want to express sincere thanks for taking the time to provide that valuable feedback and significantly enriching the process. So without further ado, I'd like to just turn it over now to Jessica Stanton for an update. We have hired Jessica of Stanton Global Communications to lead us through the rebranding work. So Jessica, go right ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much, everybody. What an amazing meeting, amazing conversation. You guys are so inspirational. And as April mentioned, I am Jessica Stanton of Stanton Global Communications. I have the honor of working with all of you on rebranding this project. And I too want to thank those of you that have already participated in the process. I've talked to a few of the board members. I've been talking to community members. I've also talked to project team members. This is a collaborative process. It's a design process. It's a different type than, of course, what you're going to be doing with the ICA, but this is also a design process. And to that point, we follow classic design phases. We have discovery, conceptualization, design development, and implementation. So right now we're in what we call the discovery phase. And as some of you who have talked to me, you understand that what we're doing, we're collecting your stories, we're listening to you, we're trying to cull out of you, what is the vision for this brand? So we're in discovery, we're having stakeholder conversations. And one of the purposes for me being here tonight is to make the pitch that for those of you I haven't had the opportunity of meeting, I would love to speak with you, just 30 minutes of your time. You don't have to talk to me before February 25th, which is only 2 days away, but please schedule a 30-minute conversation with me by the 25th. It's really important that we get your voice in this process. The rebrand, the brand is really going to be based on your voice and your vision. So before we go to the next slide, I just want to let you know that we're going to take a look at what the brand discovery phase looks like. We're collecting information, and here's some of the information that we've collected. And this is a bit of this is the beginning, a glimpse of what our brand visioning process is like. So next slide, please. So as you can see, in gathering information for us to understand what the brand vision is, what is Albina? Albina is family, community, home. And we've been graced with the pleasure of some of the artifacts that stakeholders have given us. So if you take a look in the upper left-hand corner, this is a beautiful picture from Mrs. Stell, one of your colleagues on the board, and this is her family, the Jackson Love family in the Albina neighborhood. So these are some of the conversations we're having, the very personal conversations about the stories that people have about historic Albina, what was special, what it was, where it is today, and where you want it to go forward. And there are other pictures here that are also kind of the layers of what this brand vision will be. Here's a picture that we found in the Portland archives of these beautiful children. It was a part of the Albina Neighborhood Improvement Project, the Junior Patrol. And maybe some of you know people that were in this picture. We would love to hear from you. What's your story? What does this picture do for you? What does it inspire? What memories? And then this lower left-hand corner, that's also from the Portland archives. It's a picture in 1962 of a Halloween party. Maybe you know someone there. Maybe it sparks other memories for you. And then of course, in the lower right-hand corner, it's the iconic Albina picture of North Williams and Russell Street in 1962, when this was a vital, thriving community. So again, these are the layers of the brand. And we can go to the next slide. And again, major ingredient in this historic brand is, what are our stories? So here we are looking at Troop 754. And this is another amazing picture that is bringing up the roots of historic Albina, and look at those smiles on the faces. And it was the Albina Neighborhood Improvement Committee meeting. That is Mrs. Jennings, who's the troop leader, and Mrs. Baker, the district chair, and Perlene Allen, Josephine Lewis, Regina Crutchfield, Lois Johnson, and Sandra Peterson. Maybe some of you out there know more stories about Troop 754. Also, we're going to take a look at this other picture in the upper right-hand corner, or we're helping ourselves. This was a job placement. That is all I know about this picture. I would love to learn more, but this is obviously important from the past, and it's important for what our vision is for the future. I'd love to hear more about who we're helping ourselves. Does anybody have any stories there? Oh, and then I'm so sorry, I don't know what's happening down here in the lower left-hand corner. This is this beautiful picture of Pastor Richard Probasco's grandmother, Rosa Marie Searcy. And it's a picture of her circa 1920s. I don't know if you're able to see it. I'm not able to see it on screen. My apologies, Pastor Probasco, but it's a gorgeous picture of his grandmother. And that's part of the stories that I'm learning about Albina. And then over here is a picture of students at Boise. They're reenacting a freedom march. Now this is in 2016, but again, these are the stories that we're learning about and that we're looking at and that we're putting into the texture of the brand. Next slide, please. And then of course, a major layer of what the brand vision is what is our art and our culture. And you can take a look in the upper right-hand corner. There's this lovely picture of Mayor Paul Knowles and in celebration of his 90th birthday. And this is courtesy of the Remember Me, Us Albina project that is from the Spreading the Black Joy virus campaign. And it's a film about Mayor Paul Knowles that maybe some of you have seen, but this is the art and the culture that is now in our community that we want to celebrate and bring to the forefront of the brand. And if you've seen that video, you'll know a little reason why I featured Etta James's photo. Not only was she one of the celebrated artists that was a part of the jazz music in the community, she was a featured celebrated artist in Paul Knowles' club, the Cotton Club, the West Side Cotton Club that was in historic Albina. So these are some of the stories that we're learning about, the art and the culture. And then if you look at the lower left-hand corner, the mural, Still We Rise, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, by the celebrated artist, R.V. Smith. This is located in Northeast Portland. It talks about the history. It's a historical picture when you look at it, but it's also about now and where we're going in the future. And then again, courtesy of Estelle, thank you so much, is a picture of the African American Heritage Bicentennial Commemorative Quilt. And if you look to the right in the picture, that's Mildred Jackson Love. That's Estelle's grandmother. She was one of the women that were important in creating and developing this beautiful piece of history and art and representative of our culture. So I'll keep this short. This is just a high level pitch for the rest of you who I haven't been able to talk to take 30 minutes to talk to me, to share your stories, your inspiration, what you would like to see in this brand. We're in the discovery phase now. The next time I see you, will be in design mode, but it's really important that I get as many of your voices involved in the discovery phase so that it's really an authentic brand that represents you. So sign up. I'd love to see your names on my calendar by the 25th for a conversation soon. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Jessica. Would you do me a favor as well? If you'll send me the link, I'll make sure that I just resend it so that it's in the top of folks' email. As you know, sometimes those email boxes get loaded down with things. And so we want to make sure those who do have capacity to meet with you can get that link readily. Miss Natalie, if you'll move to the next slide. And next. You all, thank you. I know it's been a fire hydrant of information, but it's been a rich discussion. I want to appreciate you for your attentiveness, for your digging in, leaning in. I knew from the beginning this would be the group that would ask the tough questions and that would hold this project accountable to the needs and wants of the community. As you can see here, and as I've shared with many of you in our one-on-one conversations, the work of the independent cover assessment team is in the forefront, though it is not our only opportunity to give influence and to lean into this community, but we will be working heavily with them over the next several meetings. We also have the branding opportunity with Ms. Jessica. So please, as you have capacity, avail yourself to that. There will be opportunities for us to connect with the design team to influence other aspects of the project as well. I want to highlight again, we don't have time at this juncture to approve our charter, but it is our goal to do that in our next meeting. So please make any notes if you have additional changes. I hope to discuss those with you in our one-on-ones moving forward. And we want to make sure that you are well-equipped, and that you feel like you're being heard. Megan mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that we are capturing all of your thoughts and questions and providing a response matrix, and we're directing those to individual, if it's for the ICA team, it's for design, if it's for ODOT, that we're making sure that we're being attentive to all of your needs. Next slide, Miss Natalie. And you can make sure, why don't we, so that we can see everyone's faces in the room. Thank you, Natalie, for your assistance there. Dr. Hold, if you would close us out.
Absolutely. Delighted to do so. Great meeting, good work, necessary work. I want to do what good speakers do. And that is they tell you what they are going to tell you, then they tell you, and then they tell you what they told you. So I'm going to end by where I started. And that is, this is Black History Month. And I gave us two quotes, one attributed to Harriet Tubman, and then the other attributed to President Barack Obama. The first one says, every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars and to change the world. And the next is, change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. The patience that you've exhibited, the passion that is obvious in this space, that's why you were sought and brought into the room. And more times than not, we do not realize that we are affecting history. We're just doing right things. We're showing up to invest in things that matter. And so while you may not carry it in your head, you may not carry it in your heart, there's this song that I love from Hamilton, the play, and that is, history has its eyes on you. History has its eyes on you. Thanks for participating in being a product not only of Black history, but of making Black history. Let's be thoughtful, purposeful, not only people who dream, but people who go to work. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.
Thank you so much. Have a great night, all.
Night.
Good night.